Over the weekend, Visa, Mastercard, and PayPal announced they would be suspending operations in Russia. This means that if you have a credit card that was issued in Russia by a Russian bank, it will not work outside the country. If you have a credit card, Visa or Mastercard, that was issued outside of Russia, it will not work inside of Russia. Now, because Russia uses domestic networks for local transactions, this will not stop local Russians from being able to buy goods, but we have already seen many services shut down. Photos claiming to show people lined up outside of kiosks for the train station because their cards don't work anymore. Key pieces of infrastructure are being stripped away from Russian citizens, and this, my friends, is one of the most dramatic escalations of sanctions that we've seen yet. I remember about 12 or so years ago, maybe more, I was talking to some friends who were big in online conspiracy stuff, and they were like, I don't know, man, there's going to be this one world currency, and they were saying, like, they're going to make the Amero, and there were pictures that were circulating online of the Amero. The Amero was the currency between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. And there were some people that told me that even in college economics courses, they were discussing the North American block currency, which would have been the Amero. And I don't know if any of that was true or whatever, but I just said to them, I was like, that makes no sense to me. There already is a one world currency. We don't need a North American currency. Your currency is simply Visa and Mastercard. Because when you travel anywhere in the world, you can swipe your Visa or Mastercard and it will work. Now, you may not be able to relate prices properly or, calculate prices properly because, let's say you got $100 and you go to the UK and, the pound or whatever is like $1.13 or $1.35, whatever it's at. I don't even know what it's at. So you're going to see something that says like 135 pounds and you're going to be like, I got enough. I don't know how much exactly. And then what happens is when you swipe that card, the currency exchange is instant. There's no need for a single currency when we just use our cards and our credit to buy things. So what this really shows is that the international payment system, as well as tons of other tech infrastructure, are cutting off Russia. Why does that matter to you? Russia is now going to be working with China on something called the Mir card system, something they've been setting up since 2014. This system is going to be teaming up with China's UnionPay to compete with Visa and MasterCard. And I suppose there's a good thing there in a certain sense. Competition is good. Visa and MasterCard owning everything is bad. But because of the war, it's not going to be real competition. It's not like you're going to have the option to choose from Mir, UnionPay, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, or whatever. It's going to be one faction of the planet uses this, another faction uses that. And the big issue here is, while Russia may not be the biggest economy in the world, if they team up with other BRICS nations, all of a sudden a large portion of the economy is now segmented from the rest of the world. A lot was done over the past several decades to to bring the economies closer together with working relationships and trade. Russia and China breaking off, things are going to get real interesting. So what can you expect? Gas prices are already up, the highest they've been in like several decades, or since 2008, I think. We just drove up to PA. We were up hanging out in Altoona because there's nothing in Altoona, but we decided to go there anyway. And gas, I think, was like $4.50, between $4 and $5 a gallon. Seriously. Diesel was like $5.50 in some areas. I think we got it for like $5.20 for diesel because we have a diesel truck. And that's crazy. It's going to get worse. People need to pay attention to what makes this country work, what makes the economy work. Fertilizer, for instance. So when we talk about Visa and MasterCard and PayPal shutting off Russian operations, the thing about PayPal, which is interesting, is it's going to be different from Visa and MasterCard. There's probably a lot of people in Russia who use it, although I don't think it's probably the dominant network. I could be wrong. But this means people are losing their jobs. This means that there are people with all the censorship and all of the banning. You're going to have people who make money off the digital economy internationally in Russia now gone. All of a sudden, they're not making any money. Well, Russia is going to be worse off for it. The people will be a lot poorer, but this means that exchange will not be happening with us either. Fertilizer is a big component. It's a big component in prices, and we import a lot from Russia. Currently, we're still buying oil from Russia. Think about that. Russia invades Ukraine. We still buy oil from them, which funds the war effort. It's psychotic, isn't it? Well, what's the alternative? If we stop importing oil from Russia because we're not energy independent anymore, thanks, Joe Biden, you are going to see your prices skyrocket. So let's read this news about what it means for Visa and MasterCard. But before we do, something I only do rarely, as you know, but I will do now, is shout out Safe and Ready Meals. Go to safeandreadymeals.com. Share the URL with friends if you like it. It is a sponsored spot. That means when you buy from safeandreadymeals.com, you're helping support this show and the work we do. These are emergency food supplies. You can see they've got a 3-month emergency food supply and a 4-week emergency food supply. My mentality is always this: don't panic. Don't think the world's ending. I don't know how much food you think you need or you do need because I don't know your family. I have a lot of this stuff. Plus, we got like 30 some odd employees, so we want to have a lot. And it's basically just like dried food. You mix it with some water, you heat it up. The reason I think this is great to shout out is that even if there's no war, no conflict, no apocalypse, it's good to have an emergency food supply and water, mind you. You should have water, food, and a first aid kit because sometimes it rains. That's what I like to say. I remember the floods in Houston, and I'm like, if you're going to be shut out and you have perishables, it's good to have some stuff that's not, it is perishable, but it's a 25-year shelf life. So if your roads get snowed in, if your power goes out or whatever, and you're like, hey, we got, a hurricane hit and we're 2 weeks without power, you can crack this stuff open and you've got food. It's not like you want to live off of it. And truth be told, if you know anything about survival, if it does go south, if there is a major crisis or whatever, the last thing you want to do is tap into your emergency reserves. You want to figure out other ways to get food. But I was thinking about this too. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to pick this stuff up because if we really do break out in a war, aside from the fact that you'll want some kind of food to eat, resilience for the American people is a good thing. If the American people can survive 4 weeks or 3 months, in the face of a massive supply chain disruption, gas prices and everything, well, then, we're going to be better off for it, and we're more likely to succeed against any international conflict that does occur. But the other thing I want to point out is that I think inflation is going to play a huge role in everything. So get it while you can, or don't. Tell me I'm wrong. You don't have to, buy it just because, I'm shouting it out. But when you do, it does support the show. And I do think it is something important you and your family should have. Worst case scenarios that lasted 25 years, you put in your closet, you forget about it. Actually, worst case scenario, you crack it open and you eat it and you're terrified, huddling in your tattered clothes. The best case scenario is you get some food you can eat at some point, and you buy food. So there you go. I don't like shouting out that kind of stuff all too often, only when I feel like there's a need for it, because it's one of the, look, I think that's a great product, but anyway, I digress. Let's read about the news because here's where it gets interesting. Russia is turning to China, which is now going to be strengthening the Dragon Bear economic bloc or the BRICS economic bloc, which, in my opinion, this is the kind of thing that can lead to war. When you have two powerful factions that are able to sustain themselves and oppose each other, war breaks out. One of the neoliberal ideas they've been pushing for the past several decades is that the more they build trade lines and make everybody dependent on everybody else, the less likely there will be for war. This is a component of the liberal economic order. So you may have heard Ian talk about this on Timcast IRL. The basic idea is the IMF, monetary fund. It's what they do. They go to these countries and say, be indebted to us. We'll give you all this great stuff. And then we're not going to have war because we have agreements and you get good stuff from us. That's kind of the idea. But when this fractures from it, when you now have other countries saying, we're going to do our own economic system, our own payment system, you now have the liberal economic order types, IMF, WEF, whatever you want to call it, saying, you cannot do this. You're basically creating a parallel economy. But when there is a parallel economy and conflict, you get war. Newsweek says, the Russian central bank announced on Sunday that some of the country's banks plan to issue cards using UnionPay, a Chinese card operating system with Russia's Mir payment system, after Visa and Mastercard suspended its operations in the country over its invasion of Ukraine. Credit cards issued by Russian banks using Visa and Mastercard payment systems will also stop functioning overseas after March 9th, according to Reuters. UnionPay is a Chinese system that is enabled in 180 countries and specializes in providing cross-border payment services. In using UnionPay as an alternative, Russia's Mir network, a payment system for electronic fund transfers, and is sponsored by the Russian government, will partner with the Chinese system to issue co-badged cards. Saber Bank, Russia's largest lender, said that it will be studying the possibility of issuing co-badged cards called Mir UnionPay, and that they will announce the launch date of those cards at a later time, Russian news agency TASS reported. Cards that combine Mir network and the UnionPay system will allow users to make payments and cash withdrawals abroad, according to TASS. Alfa Bank, a private bank in Russia, is also considering adopting this option. Alpha Bank said that they are already at work to launch cards based on UnionPay, with Tinkoff Bank also considering the step, TASS and Reuters reported. However, some Russian banks are already using the Chinese payment system, including the Russian Regional Development Bank, VBRR, Pochta Bank, Gazprom Bank, Roselkaz Bank, Bank St. Petersburg, and Promsivyez Bank. All right. Visa and MasterCard on Sunday joined the growing list of companies suspending its operations in Russia over the invasion. Visa's CEO Al Kelly denounced the Russian invasion in a statement and called it an ongoing threat to peace and stability that requires a response in line with our values. I'll tell you what I think. I think these companies in the West are preparing for a larger scale war with Russia. In the United States, if we go to war with Russia, declaration, companies cannot provide any services, which means you do not want to be a company like Visa or MasterCard sitting there with your thumb up your bum when the government announces we have formally declared war on Russia and we are entering the fray, going to be defending Ukraine. And then your Visa and MasterCard going like, we are actively supporting an enemy of the United States at a time of war. Now, I don't think if there was a declaration of war, these companies would be punished necessarily because the declaration happened and then they were like, okay, now we're going to suspend operations. But it is substantially easier. And I'm not saying it's necessarily because they think it's going to happen, but I think it's a possibility. Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, all of these companies, Google, whatever, are probably expecting. It's not about virtue signaling necessarily. It's about if the U.S. declares war, if NATO goes in and we're dragged in on this, we cannot be providing support to an enemy of the United States at a time of war. That's literally treason. I don't know how that applies to companies. I don't know if they go that far. Maybe they'll say, no, we're not going to play that crazy of a game. Just end your services now. Suffice it to say, if you're a company that does international business, it is easier for you now to plan ahead and take the PR, virtue signal, cut off your services, and then not have to worry about it if war does escalate, which I kind of think may be happening. They go on to say, quote, we are compelled to act following Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and the unacceptable events that we have witnessed. We regret the impact this will have on our valued colleagues and on the clients, partners, merchants, and cardholders we serve in Russia. Visa will work with its clients and partners in Russia to halt all transactions within the coming days. This means Visa cards issued outside of Russia will no longer function inside the country, according to the company's statement. So let me show you something. This has been long planned. Russia's known this is going to happen. The U.S., NATO, they all knew exactly what was happening. And that makes me wonder about what's going on. What I mean is anything bad that happens to you in terms of costs or prices or jobs or whatever, they knew was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen to you. Mir payment system, according to Wikipedia, they say it was adopted by the Central Bank of Russia under a law. It's a Russian payment system established by the Central Bank of Russia under a law adopted on May 1st, 2017. It's operated by the Russian National Card Payment System. The development and implementation of Mir was spurred by the imposition of international sanctions against Russia in 2014. Mir cards were initially accepted mostly by Russian-based companies such as Aeroflot and Russian Railways, but it gradually became popular among foreign companies with operations in Russia. In April 2016, AliExpress became the first foreign company to accept Mir as a form of payment within the Russian Federation, and McDonald's was the first U.S. company to accept it 3 months later. Well, so there you go. So initially, conversations were being had in the mid-2000s that aimed to create a framework of an autonomous payment system, a payment processing system inside the Russian Federation. While development was nearing completion, the global financial crisis put further activity on indefinite hold. For some time now, over a decade, there has been a plan to create their own payment processing system, debit cards, credit cards, and payment systems. Russia has been planning to compete with the global hegemony of Visa and MasterCard. And now they have it. And now they're going to be working with China. They're going to be working with China's Union Bank. They've been planning for this. India and Russia expressed interest in continuing dialogue on accepting RuPay cards and Mir cards within national payment infrastructures. They said the Mir payment was introduced in Armenia, South Ossetia, as Abkhazia, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. In October 2021, Mir was launched in the United Arab Emirates, Bulgaria, and Thailand. In 2021, Mir was launched in United Arab Emirates. Bulgaria and Thailand are expected to follow according to the Central Bank of Russia. Mir was also being tested in the UK and in South Korea. This is fascinating to me. We've got oil prices surging already, and it's going to get worse. We've got fertilizer shortages, food shortages, everything's getting worse, and parallel economies are spreading apart. World War III, I guess. I don't know. I kind of hate to say it because it's such a buzz phrase, but I mean, we are staring down the barrel of global conflict in a way, man, I don't even know how to describe. Oh, and don't forget, my friends, I know I often talk about civil war. That hasn't stopped. The prospect of the U.S. dissolving, this is only making it substantially worse. In the event, there is, actually, let me slow down. Fertilizer shortage. Take a look at the story from South China Morning Post. Asia faces food shortages as Russia-Ukraine fighting hits shipments. Heavy fighting closes off parts of the Black Sea, affecting shipments of wheat, oats, and other cereals to Asia, upsetting supply chains. Disturbance could create domino effect on production of other consumer foods, but Australia hopes to fill part of that demand. Perhaps they can. Or perhaps. With the heavy fighting between Russia and Ukraine, with companies cutting off Russia, and Russia being a major supplier of fertilizer to the U.S., it's entirely possible. Food prices are going to skyrocket. Oil is going to skyrocket. The economies are going to be hit substantially. Fertilizer. This is big. This is food. What we think we know from the Arab Spring, depending on who you ask, food shortages play a huge role in, food prices play a huge role in civil war and revolution. In the United States, we're already hyper-polarized. You've got one side putting up Ukrainian flags and just saying war, 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 war. Then you've got the populist faction, so that's the establishment, saying no war, but Russia's still pretty bad. What happens when our culture war, civil war, cold civil war, whatever you want to call it, is exacerbated by hungry people? Gas prices. Are you looking at gas prices? I mean, take a look at this from timcast.com. Oil prices reached their highest level since 2008 as the U.S. and its allies consider a ban on Russian oil imports and anticipate delays in the return of Iranian oil to the global markets. Brent crude hit $139.13 a barrel. That's massive. They say, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate reached $130.50. Both are benchmarks that have now reached their highest level since 2008. Within hours, prices lost some gains. Brent went up $6.60 or 5.6%, and WTI went up 5.8%. According to the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the U.S. and its European allies are considering banning imports of Russian oils. The White House is working closely with key congressional committees to move forward with their own ban. Prices are going to go through the roof for gas. Diesel's already really high. If diesel goes up, food goes up, all goods go up because truckers are the ones who are bringing it to you. Now we got a major truckers protest currently in Hagerstown, not too far away from where I'm at. So you got pissed off truckers. You've got skyrocketing diesel prices, you've got fertilizer shortages coming if this continues to escalate. Your food is going to go up. Your gas is going to go up. Now, it's entirely possible that conflict overshadows the cultural conflict here in the U.S., but I doubt it. If we go to war, and it's looking like we're getting dangerously close to doing so, maybe we won't, I don't know, but if we do, there is going to be outrage in this country from the anti-war populist types. They're going to be saying, Joe Biden, you have failed us, you are a pathetic president, and they're going to demand change. And maybe there will be a recall, a voter overhaul, who knows? Or maybe the establishment types, the people who control Twitter and Facebook and all these big tech companies are going to put the boot down on anyone who dare oppose their war machine. And there are going to be a lot of pissed off people who can't afford to eat or drive their cars. Conveniently, what was happening with COVID, I said, was perfect for any country that was preparing for war. Now, I thought it was going to be China, truth be told. I thought it was going to be Taiwan, not Ukraine. I should have predicted it because I knew there was conflict with Ukraine in the eastern region, but I didn't see it. Many of us weren't paying attention, and I should have. Taiwan's still on the table, mind you, as a catalyst for potential World War III. If things escalate beyond Ukraine, then we're there. If China moves in for Taiwan, now we've got Ukraine and Taiwan. Crazy. But you know what, man? We saw during COVID, people fleeing big cities, people doing remote work. And I said, this is good stuff for any country that's preparing for war. Because now if there's a nuke dropped on New York City, a lot of the higher income people who are running big corporations don't live there anymore, and they've all spread out. When you've got every single person in one city, and you say a nuke hits New York, you wipe out the leaders of almost every industry in the country, or leaders, leadership positions, not the leaders, but like, So all of a sudden, all the rich people spread out and leave New York. It sucks. They can. Now, the leaders of industry aren't in any single location, and their workers work remote. If a major city gets hit by a bomb, the country can still function substantially better than it could. It seems like there was some kind of internal great reset to make the U.S. more resilient in the face of serious conflict. Now I see all this happening, and I'm like, oh, man. Whether intentional or not, the U.S. seems to have prepared for war. Now, it was just COVID. But think about what happened. It's kind of crazy. And it makes you, there's a lot of things about COVID that if it were the case that the U.S. saw an opportunity to fortify against a potential war, makes you wonder a whole lot about what they expect to happen and what's coming. But I'll tell you this. If the Russians have been preparing their payment system for 10 years or, 8 years now, since it's longer, actually. I mean, if you go back to 2008 or to the 2000s, they knew this was coming. The U.S. knew this was coming. Prices are going to be skyrocketing. It seems like they knew this was coming. And truth be told, I didn't believe it when they said it was. When the Biden administration came out and said Russia will invade Kiev, I said, no way. That's ridiculous. I didn't believe it. And now here we are. I don't know where that we have this photo up on Timcast showing gas prices. I think that may be a current one. I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you this, man. California, there's some high gas prices. It's always in California, right? But in West Virginia, it's like almost $4. In Central PA, we went there, it was over $4, and diesel was over $5. Diesel's what is going to get you, because the truckers got to fuel up to deliver your goods, and if the cost of fuel goes up, everything else goes with it. And hungry people are angry people. So I'll tell you this: safeandreadymeals.com may be right for you, maybe not. I honestly, I hope. If you guys check out our sponsor, and I appreciate it, I hope you never open that bucket ever. Now, truth be told, I have, because we ate it and it was good. And we were like, let's try it out. Let's see what, let's see what we're getting into. But I'm hoping that you guys have something like that and you never use it. Truth be told, I don't know if I believe you will. Like, seriously, I mean, are we really talking about nuclear annihilation? I can't believe it. It kind of scares me, though, because I was wrong about Kiev. And things could spiral out of control really, really quickly. I just watched the other night The Sum of All Fears. Interesting movie. Check it out. But it's just a movie. I can't predict the future, man. And if you can't either, then you got to decide for yourself what you think is right for you. But watching the shortages, we've had food shortages for the past several years. Now fertilizer shortages are coming. Fuel shortages may be coming. The U.S., I think they announced they're releasing emergency reserves. Scary days, man. Scary days. But you don't got to be worried. You don't got to panic. You don't got to freak out. We are resilient people. And I know that most of you who are watching this, almost all of you, I would say, are resilient, confident individuals. And I know you'll be all right. So do what you think is best for your family. Pay attention to the news. Thanks for watching. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.